You keep telling yourself the same thing. I just need to be stronger. Next time will be different. Next time you'll control it. Next time you won't fall into it again. But then next time comes, and it happens again. Not because you wanted it to, not because you planned it. It just pulls you in. And afterwards, it's always the same feeling. That quiet frustration, that heavy guilt, that thought sitting in the back of your mind. Why can't I control myself? Because it's not like you don't try. You do. You resist. You fight it. You tell yourself, not this time. But the more you try, the more draining it feels. Like you're constantly using energy just to stay in control. And eventually, you run out. And that's when it happens. Again. And now you're stuck in this cycle. You feel the urge, you resist, you slip, you regret. You promise to do better, and then it repeats. Over and over. And what's starting to scare you is not just that you keep falling into it. It's that it feels harder to resist than it used to be. Like something has changed. Like the same level of effort doesn't work anymore. Like what used to be manageable now feels overwhelming. So naturally, you come to one conclusion. There must be something wrong with me. I'm just not disciplined enough. I don't have the control I thought I did. And that's where it starts to hit deeper. Because now it's not just about temptation. It's about how you see yourself. You start questioning your strength, your consistency, even your intentions. Because if you really wanted to stop, wouldn't you be able to? And now you're caught between two things. You want to do better, but you're starting to feel like you can't. And that creates something even heavier than the temptation itself. Exhaustion. Because it's not just one moment. It's the constant effort of trying to stay in control. And slowly, that effort starts draining you. Until one day you sit there and think, why does this feel so much harder than before? And here's the part you haven't considered yet. What if it's not that you're weak? What if something is actually making you weaker? Because this isn't just happening once. It's a pattern now. You already know how it goes. It doesn't start with failure. It starts small. The thought, an image, a moment you didn't expect. Something catches your attention for a second longer than it should. And you feel it immediately. That pull. Not strong enough to control you right away, but enough to sit there in the background. So you try to ignore it. You distract yourself. You move on. You tell yourself it's nothing. But it doesn't really go away. It just waits. And the more you think about not thinking about it, the more it stays. Until eventually, you're alone. And that's when it gets louder. Because now there's nothing competing with it. No distraction. No interruption. Just you and that feeling. And this is where the real fight starts. You try to resist. You remind yourself why you don't want to fall into it again. You think about how it felt last time. You tell yourself, don't do this. And for a moment, you actually hold your ground. But then something shifts. Not outside, inside. That resistance starts to feel heavy. Like you're using energy just to stay where you are. And the longer you hold it, the harder it becomes. Until eventually, you stop fighting as hard. And that's when it happens. Again. And right after, you already know the feeling. Silence. Then disappointment. Then that familiar thought. Why did I do that again? And what hurts more than the moment itself is the pattern. Because this isn't new. You've said the same thing before. I won't do this again. I'll be more careful next time. I just need to try harder. But the next time comes, and it feels the same. The urge doesn't feel weaker. If anything, feels stronger. And that's what confuses you, because you expected the opposite. You thought the more you resisted, the easier it would get. But it didn't. It got harder. And now your mind starts turning on you. Why can't I control myself? Why does this feel worse than before? Why do I keep ending up here? And slowly, you stop questioning the pattern, and you start questioning yourself. Maybe I'm just weak. Maybe I don't have enough discipline. Maybe something is wrong with me. Because what else explains this? You're trying. You're aware. You don't even want it. And yet, you keep getting pulled back into it. So now it doesn't just feel like temptation anymore. It feels like something you're losing against. And the more you lose, the more tired you get. Not just physically, mentally. Because you're not just dealing with the moment. You're dealing with the constant effort of trying not to fall into it again. And that's what drains you. The repetition, the fight, the failure, the regret, over and over, until eventually you stop seeing it as something you struggle with and start seeing it as something that defines you. And that's the part that traps you. Because now you're not just stuck in the behavior, you're stuck in the belief that this is just who I am. But what if that belief is the problem? What if the issue isn't that you lack discipline? What if the issue is what you've been told to rely on? Because right now, you're treating this like a willpower problem. Like if you just push harder, try more, control yourself better, you'll finally win. And that sounds right, feels logical. But look at what's actually happening. The more you rely on willpower, the more exhausted you become. The more you fight it directly, the more it wears you down. And eventually, you lose. Not because you didn't try, but because you tried the same way again. And it didn't work. So let's question that. What if this isn't about how strong your willpower is? What if something else is happening before you even get to the point of resisting? Because think about it, by the time you're fighting the temptation, it already has momentum. It's already in your mind, already pulling your attention, already building pressure. You're not starting from zero, you're starting from behind. And that changes everything. Because now it's not just, can I resist this? It's, why does it already feel this strong before I even try? And here's where it gets uncomfortable. What if the urge isn't random? What if it's being built, little by little, throughout your day? Not in one moment, but through repeated exposure. Small things you didn't think mattered. Moments you didn't take seriously. Things you let pass without questioning. All stacking up, quietly, until eventually, they reach a point where resisting feels almost impossible. And now, when you finally try to fight it, you're not fighting one moment. You're fighting everything that led up to it. And that's why it feels heavier. That's why it feels harder. That's why it drains you. Because you're not just dealing with temptation. You're dealing with something that's been building inside you for hours, sometimes days. And here's the shift. Maybe this isn't about you being weak. Maybe it's about something constantly feeding the urge before you even notice it. And if that's true, then trying harder at the end of the process will never fix what's happening at the beginning. Here's what's actually going on underneath all of this. It's not just the moment you fall. It's everything that builds up to it. Because temptation doesn't suddenly appear at full strength. It grows, quietly, gradually, repeatedly. Throughout your day, your attention is being pulled in different directions. You see things, you hear things, you scroll past things. Most of it doesn't feel serious. Feels normal, harmless. Just a few seconds here, a quick glance there, something you don't even think twice about. But your mind doesn't ignore those moments. It stores them. And every time you're exposed to something that triggers desire, your brain responds. It activates. Even if it's small, even if it's quick, even if you move past it right after, that activation still happens. And when it happens once, it's manageable. But when it happens again, and again, and again, something changes. You don't reset. You accumulate. Your mind stays slightly activated. Your attention stays slightly pulled. Your resistance slowly decreases. Not all at once, but enough to matter. Think of it like this. Imagine someone calling your name. Once, you can ignore it. Twice, still manageable. But if someone keeps calling your name, over and over, throughout the day, eventually you respond. Not because you wanted to, but because it wore you down. That's what's happening here. You're not just dealing with one moment of temptation. You're dealing with a constant stream of small triggers that are quietly building pressure inside you. So by the time you're alone, by the time there's no distraction, by the time the urge shows up fully, you're already tired. Your resistance isn't at full strength anymore. It's been reduced. And now you're trying to fight something from a weakened position. And that's why it feels unfair. Because you're judging yourself based on the final moment, without seeing everything that led up to it. You think, I should have resisted. But what you don't see is, you were already worn down before you even tried. And here's the hidden pattern. You're not failing randomly. You're being gradually influenced. Through repetition. Through exposure. Through things you didn't think mattered. And because you didn't notice that process, you kept trying to fix the outcome, instead of understanding the cause. So every time it happened again, you blamed yourself, instead of questioning what was shaping you. And that's why nothing changed. Because you were trying to solve the last step, without seeing the entire chain. And this is where most people misunderstand what's actually going on. Because when you think about temptation, you immediately think about resisting it, fighting it, avoiding it, trying to stay strong in the moment. So when you struggle, you assume the solution is simple. I just need more strength. I need to be more disciplined. I need to try harder next time. But that approach only focuses on the end of the process, not the beginning. And that's why it keeps failing. Because the real issue isn't just what you do in the moment, it's what's shaping you before the moment even arrives. And this is something you can actually see if you look closely at how Scripture approaches it. It doesn't just talk about resisting what's in front of you. It keeps pointing back to something deeper, what you're allowing in, what you're focusing on, what's influencing your thoughts before anything happens. Not in a complicated way, in a very simple one. Pay attention to what you're exposed to, because it shapes what you become sensitive to. Pay attention to what you keep looking at, because it changes what you start wanting. Pay attention to what fills your attention, because it affects what you can actually resist. And that shifts everything. Because now this isn't just about a moment of temptation. It's about awareness. Awareness of what's influencing you throughout your day. Awareness of what's quietly building pressure inside you. Awareness of what's making the final moment harder than it needs to be. And this is the part people miss. God isn't just telling you to be stronger. He's trying to make you aware. Aware of patterns. Aware of influences. Aware of what's shaping your reactions. Because once you see that clearly, you stop fighting the wrong battle. You stop waiting until the urge is strong, and start noticing what made it strong in the first place. And that changes how you move. Because now you're not just reacting, you're paying attention. And that's where real control begins. Not in forcing yourself to resist something overwhelming, but in recognizing what's been quietly influencing you long before that moment. And this is the correction you need to make. This isn't just a strength problem. It's an awareness problem. Because if you don't see what's shaping your desires, you'll keep trying to fight them at the surface, while they're being built underneath. And that's a fight you'll keep losing. And once you see that, everything starts to make sense. Because now you're not just looking at the moment you fall, you're seeing everything that leads up to it. All those small things you ignored, all those moments you didn't think mattered, all those exposures you brushed off as normal. They weren't random. They were building something. And that's why it felt like it was getting harder. Not because you were getting weaker, but because something was slowly wearing you down. You weren't losing control overnight. You were losing it gradually. And this is the shift that changes everything. You're not just struggling with temptation. You're struggling with what's feeding it. It's not just about resisting the urge. It's about understanding what's shaping the urge before it even shows up. And once that clicks, you stop looking at yourself the same way. Because now those thoughts you had before, why can't I control myself? Why does this feel worse than before? Why do I keep ending up here? They start to lose their weight. Not because the struggle disappears, but because it finally makes sense. You're not just dealing with one moment of weakness. You've been dealing with constant influence, repeated triggers, mental fatigue, slow pressure building over time. So when the moment comes, you're not starting fresh, you're already drained. And that changes how you see everything. Because now the problem isn't, I need more discipline. The problem becomes, I need to understand what's influencing me. That's the real shift, from trying to control the outcome to recognizing what's shaping it. And that brings clarity, because now you're not confused anymore. You're not sitting there wondering why it keeps happening. You see the pattern, you see the buildup, you see the cause, and that answers the question from the beginning. It's not that you're weak, it's that you've been worn down. So now, the question changes. Not, why can't I resist this? But, what is making this harder for me than it should be? Because as long as you stay in the first question, you'll keep blaming yourself. You'll keep trying to fix the final moment without ever seeing what's building it. But once you shift the question, everything slows down. You start noticing things you ignored before. You start seeing patterns earlier. You start recognizing what pulls your attention before it becomes overwhelming. And that changes how you move. Not in a dramatic way, in a quiet one. You don't wait until you're exhausted to fight anymore. You don't rely on willpower at the last second. You don't put yourself in the same position and expect a different result. Because now you understand something you didn't see before. Control doesn't start in the moment. It starts long before the moment. In what you allow in what you keep looking at, in what you don't question. And once you see that clearly, you stop fighting blindly. You stop reacting late. You stop measuring yourself based on your worst moment. And this is the part you need to hold on to. You're not someone who lacks control. You're someone who hasn't fully seen what's shaping your control yet. And now you're starting to. So this isn't about becoming a completely different person overnight. It's about becoming more aware, little by little. Because awareness changes how you respond. Awareness changes what you allow. Awareness changes what builds inside you. And that's where real strength actually comes from. Not from forcing yourself to resist something overwhelming, but from not letting it become overwhelming in the first place. So maybe it was never about you being weak. Maybe it felt that way because something was quietly making you weaker. And now that you see it, you don't have to fight the same way anymore.